is king. These are from Ulster Unionist Labour Association members. And Gallagher responded appropriately that this was a stupid question. You know I am a revolutionary and that the only loyalty is to the working class. So we have to be very careful when we look at these statistics and we think, oh my God, there were 60,000 people or 40,000 people engaged in a strike in Belfast. This was an economistic strike. This was about working conditions. Elements and the unskilled were involved in this strike, but the skilled workers were involved in this strike wanted to limit the strike to the industrial arena, not to wider politics. Right? But in January 1920, in the local government elections, 12 Belfast Labour candidates, including Sam Cade, a Connacht, Sam Cade, believe it or not, a Connacht socialist, tops the poll were, in January 1920, the Shankill Road. Well, the Shankill constituency, I mean not the Shankill Road, but the Shankill constituency. Dawson Gordon is also elected, G.R. Campbell is elected. Belfast Labour, all of whom are not, practical, 10 are definitely firm anti-partitionists and Conleyites, right, get 12 seats. Sinn Féin got 6, and the Irish Party got 6. Okay, the Unions got 35. Right? So, the combination of this massive general strike and this result has what effect on the Unionist establishment in Belfast? Who do they fear more? Do they fear the 6 Irish Party councillors and Joe Devon? Do they fear the 6 Sinn Féin councillors and Dennis McCullough? Or are they worried about these 12 Labour councillors? I would suggest that they're far more worried about the challenge of Labour than they are of nationalism in a city where 2/3 of the population are Protestant and 1/3 of the population are Catholic. That a national revolution which promotes the interests of the working class would have a better chance of success in the north than a middle class nationalist revolution led by Sinn Féin. That the Sinn Féin's avoidance of the social question doesn't serve them well at all. But then that was their own social agenda. That was what an awful lot of Sinn Féin leaders wanted. Where is the evidence that the establishment are a little bit concerned about this? This is Lord French, okay, who was in charge of Ireland, military governor. French in January 1918 sent what's called the Belfast Memo to the British Cabinet. He also releases all the Sinn Féin prisoners. Why does he release the Sinn Féin prisoners arrested during the German plot? Because they are all the conservative nationalists who are going to come out and control Sinn Féin. So he releases Griffiths and these De Valera's already escaped. So until the strikes in the north in 1918 occurred and a very dangerous crisis was at hand, which might plunge the whole country into disaster. And he says, this junction with the Bolsheviks was condemned in the strongest manner by the real Sinn Féin leaders, such as John McNeill, that's Owen McNeill, De Valera and Griffiths. Okay, so there is a clear appreciation that the advance of Labour, now Labour is not at this point independent, anti-partitionist Labour is not threatening Unionist domination of politics in Belfast. The Unionists are still comfortable enough in their position, but they're losing considerable amounts of the very bottom of the working class, who are beginning to listen to different ideas, despite the fact that Sinn Féin is not offering them anything, really. It's in this condition, then, that you get what we can call the 1920 Northern Counter-Revolution. These are Catholic refugees in Dublin. Okay? There are letters from Dawson Bates to Edward Carson describing how we're going to have to get rid of these Labour guys. When they set up the Ulster Unionist Labour Association, or the Ulster Workers Union, in December 1918, it's with the expressed intention of deflecting working class Protestants away from socialism. Okay? So what is the basis of this counter-revolution? Belfast. Belfast has 9% of Ireland's population. There's 21% of its workers. Belfast is a real British industrial city. It's in a triangle with Liverpool, Glasgow, and Manchester on down into Lancashire. It has more in common really with this area than it does with the rest of Ireland. Ireland is a supplier of agricultural produce to Britain. Okay? With the exception of food, because Ireland has exported a lot of food to Britain in this period, but 19.1 million out of 20.9 million pounds of exports from Ireland come from Belfast. Things have changed slightly. Okay? So Belfast is the richest and the most industrially developed part of Ireland by a long degree. In 1914 there were 20,000 people working in the shipyards, the big and the wee yards. Okay? Working in Clark and Harlem. Right? About 2/3 of them are highly skilled workers. Right? And they're members of British-based craft unions. They're not members of the Irish Transport General Workers Union, and they're not colonialist socialists by any stretch of the imagination. Right? So within the Protestant working class, the shipyard men performed a key role in linking labour with loyalism. Right? Across Ireland, skilled labour was so weak that they had to make common cause with unskilled labour and agricultural labourers within syndicalism because that was the economic conditions. Skilled workers in Belfast didn't need to do that. Okay? They needed to join a craft union or amalgamated trade union for Britain, and then they were powerful enough to negotiate their own conditions. In fact, their conditions were really good. They were about 3-to-1, paid 3 times more than an unskilled worker. And the vast majority of them were Protestants. And there was a direct linkage between the workers in the shipyards and loyalism. And there was this idea that the shipyard workers and the engineers, embodied all the qualities of stoic Protestant work ethic, and this was progress, and this was Belfast, and this differentiated Belfast from the rest of Ireland. And it fed into the opposition to Home Rule. Now this is again O'Connor. This myth of industrial Belfast conceived many lags in social development. The exploited underclass of linen lassies. These are the people who start listening to the Belfast Labour Party, to Campbell and Dawson Gordon and Sam Kay. The marginalised Catholic workforce are the subsistence wage labourers in agriculture, which remain the North's chief industry. So although the North is different, there are still thousands of people who are not involved in these skilled unions. But the skilled unions are the backbone of industry, and they're applied effectively to break trade union militancy. So within a 2-year period, Belfast goes from the most industrial militant part of Ireland to 1921 there's no strike activity in the city at all. Okay? It's wiped out. Now, why? The first one is we begin in 1921 to hit the beginnings of an economic downturn. We go from the high point of employment to a post-war recession. And labour becomes scarce again, and the bargaining power of trade unions is reduced. Yes, they get their 44-hour day in 1919. There is temporary enthusiasm for labour in the city. There's a massive May Day demonstration in 1919. Labour, there's one independent Labour, there's 12 seats, we have to really say. And D.R. Campbell is the leader of this grouping, and these people are colonialised socialists. But moves are made very, very quickly to link the socialist labour with Sinn Féin. The man who does it is Edward Carson, and he does it at Finnehy on the 12th of July 1920. Now, despite the fact that Carson himself called Orange speeches like the unrolling of a mummy, full of old bones and rotten rags, he gave plenty of them. And at this one he says, "These men who come forward posing as the friends of labour care no more about labour than does the man on the moon." Edward obviously had a heart of corn and was really worried about labour. Their real object is that they mislead and bring about disunity among our own people. And in the end, before we know where we are, we find ourselves in the same bondage and slavery as in the rest of Ireland in the south and the west. And these are not mere words. I am sick of words without action. And this acts as the premise for the shipyard expulsion. So you get the workplace expulsions of all Catholics and rotten prods. And the rotten prods are the socialist trade unionists. There's a row in Belfast City Hall over the joint Labour Sinn Féin motion demanding reinstatement of the expelled workers. The divided labour movement has now sunk to a new low in the city, and the opinion of the vast majority of unionist workers. Okay? Labour was being squeezed on both sides in the national conflict. So what happens? 10,000 Catholics and 700 rotten Protestants trade unionists were expelled from the city shipyards, mills and foundries. Over the next 2 years, 23,000 people were driven from their homes in Belfast, while approximately 50,000 people fled the six-county territory because of intimidation. The death toll in Belfast alone in the same period, in the period of from 1920 to 1922, was 500. Of these, almost 60,000 were Catholics in the city, where they made up only a quarter of the population. And this is done in many respects by what's called the Vigilance Committee and the Imperial Guard, who are members of the skilled trade unions in the shipyards. And James Craig visits the shipyard straight after the pogrom, and he presents them with a flag, and he says, "Do I agree with what you boys did?" And I have to say yes. And there's evidence that this was partly coordinated between Craig and Fred Crawford in the correspondence of Fred Crawford, the Loyalist organiser. Now, why did they do this? They do this to secure their political position and to quieten down the threat of social unrest and revolution. We might suggest that perhaps the threat wasn't as apparent or as grave as they might have appreciated, but that's what happened. So what happens to Labour in the North? The new Northern Ireland Labour Party is established in 1924. It's initially anti-partitionist. Many of the same personalities are involved. Sam Kyle is elected the Stormont. Harry Midgley is originally anti-partitionist and Conley named the Facts. And that the Facts changes his opinion and becomes partitionist. Midgley the Rising Star. There are 3 independent anti-partitionist Labour members of Stormont. James Craig abolishes PR for the Stormont elections, and he says he does this because he wanted only men who are for the union on the one hand or who are against it and want to go into a Dublin Parliament on the other. Why? Because Joe Devlin and nationalists and Cahir Healy and constitutional Sinn Féin are not going to be attracted to his support base, this Protestant working class. This is why it's one of the main reasons. That the threat of nationalism within the 6 counties is not as threatening to the unionist monolith as the threat of Labour, genuine socialism and trade unionism. Okay? The Northern Ireland Labour Party would always remain on the margins to swept away in the Troubles, but they do play a significant role, particularly in politics at the end of the Second World War. Now, what's the manifestation of this in our study in Tyrone? January 1919, when the great general strikes went on, Fred Crawford here, in his correspondence in his diary, says that there had been a strike at Caledon Mulliman. He says that Catholics struck to remove Protestant foremen, and the Catholics had filled servicemen jobs during the war. This was the basis of the strike. And that the owner, John Fulton, had refused to secede to these sectarian demands. Okay? Fulton claimed that a Catholic priest was the leader of the Sinn Féiners in the district and had organised the strike to persecute Protestants. In fact, the strike was organised by Potter O'Donnell as part of the Irish Transport and General Working Union, and it was a feed-on strike from the Monaghan Soviet, or the Monaghan Asylum Soviet, which had taken place just previously. And it's through O'Donnell's success in Monaghan, they take over the lunatic asylum, okay, and they run it, well, they don't really run the Soviet base, but they declare it a Soviet, that O'Donnell then is encouraged to go to Caledon by members of the Orange Order, who work in the mill. And he organises the Irish Transport and General Workers Union in Caledon Mill against John Fulton to achieve better wages. And both Catholic and Protestant workers joined the Irish Transport and General Workers Union in Caledon. The Armoured Guardian described how almost every night the strikers parade through the streets of Caledon, headed by bands following the red flag. Caledon. Caledon. The Voice of Labour claimed that enthusiasm is at fever pitch, with the National Union of Railwaymen cooperating, a citizens' police force has been organised, and the Orange Band parades and cheers for the Transport Union. They paraded up and down Caledon with a Lambeck drum in support of a Soviet. Well, it wasn't a Soviet in Caledon, but it didn't seize Fulton. In July 19... No, so what does Fulton do? Fulton readmits workers back into Caledon on a sectarian basis. Okay, he breaks the strike. Now, not all Protestant workers in Caledon accept Fulton's terms. I think 12 families emigrate rather than go back into the mill. Okay? Fulton then has a celebration in July 1918. There's about 160 workers involved here. Caledon's double celebration, he puts a big banner overthrow of the Hun and Irish Bolshevik. Okay? Now, what is depressing about this is that this is in 1918. In 1918, Catholics and Protestants in Caledon are marching up and down behind a Lambic drum with a red flag. By 1922, people are throwing bombs into the Catholic Church in Caledon, and the Catholics are responding in kind with reprisal violence against Protestants in Caledon. So we go from a position where Caledon is like an example of working class solidarity to Caledon is an example of sectarian animosity inside 3 years. Okay? And O'Donnell recounts, gradually the orange tunes give way to, socialist lyrics. So imagine somebody playing the International on a lambic drum. So, now, what do we get then? What do we get in what some people, majority, would call the Orange State? Well, this is what James Craig tells us about the Orange State. What did the Orange government do? What did the Unionist government do? These are James Craig's own words. They distributed the bones. Okay? This great industrial prosperity on which the reputation of Belfast was based fails, and is only temporarily revived by the Second World War. The great industries can't keep up with globalisation and free markets and competition. And the northern economy withers. And at the beginning, and I think by the 1930s, 37% of Catholics in Belfast and 20% of Protestant homes did not have hot water or inside toilets. So the poor millies, Catholics and Protestants, who were out voting in January 1920 or out on the May Day parade in 1918, if they hadn't left and emigrated somewhere else, were just as badly off as they were during the Revolution. But this is not a sort of reverse of kick the Pope, which is kick James Craig, because things were as bad, if not worse, in the south. This is somebody's house in Waterford. This is a house. The dying king. Now, we have one of the great ironies of this, and this is for those of you who are struggling to stay awake. This is one of the great ironies of the aborted social revolution in the south, is that militancy survives in the south because of syndicalism. Right? So Black Friday in Britain, the Tory government, the national government go in and they smash the big unions. Okay, the railwaymen, the miners, shipbuilding, smash them. Big unions, the set pieces, the shock troops out of the road. Okay, militant unionism is dead. You can't do that in Ireland, because if you lock Thomas Johnson and William O'Brien up, it would probably make things more militant, because the leadership of the Labour movement aren't that militant. They speak militant language, but they're trying to restrain things. And the militancy is not coordinated. It's from the ground up. It springs up in people's working conditions and the demands of the rank and file. It's not directed policy. It's like sort of a tetra. You cut the head off and another one goes. So you smash the postal workers' strike in the Free State in 1922 and you think, we've broken the big union, and then agricultural labourers from Waterford start taking over the county. It's the nature of the type of trade union militancy. And it's a vain kick. And this is O'Connor again. By pitting political will against economic logic in a period of an economic depression, where the government are bent on a policy of austerity, okay, and sensible economics, Southern workers altered the course but not the direction of class conflict. And it goes right through to 1923. And the reason why it gets to survive until 1923 is because of the Civil War. And the Free State has to consolidate its political position. So once it defeats the anti-treaty IRA, then it directs its attention to Labour. Now, the great irony of this is that Larkin gets out of prison and he sails home. And he arrives in April 1923. And he's clearly, from the perspective of someone intent. Now, we can say what we want about Larkin's personality, and if you want to read Emmett O'Connor's incredible biography of Hero or Wrecker, okay, he had some serious issues, but he was a revolutionary socialist. And had Larkin been in Ireland during the period that Tom Johnson was prevaricating and speaking radically but acting conservatively, we might have had something like a different outcome. Alright? So Larkin sails home on the 30th of April 1923, and he immediately starts disputes in Dublin amongst the dockers. These are his people. And 20,000 people are engaged in trade union militancy in the autumn of 1923. 20,000. 23.2% of all British strike activity in 1923 took place in the Free State, which had a population of less than 4 million. 23.2% of all British strike activity. That's now 1.2 million strike days were lost, and 131 strikes took place, and there were 2,635 strikers. But you would think from reading an awful lot of the academic accounts of this, that people didn't want social change in Ireland. Never since has the working class confronted the rationale of capitalism so profoundly or so extensively than in this period. Now, what's the local manifestation of this? And I promise this, we don't have far to go. So we go back to East Tyrone. Even though it's not in the 26 counties, yes, they still engaged in this wave of militancy. Right? So, Tyrone Brickyard and on her colliery. This is the strike notice of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union and their strike against the Tyrone Brickyard. The J. McMahon, who's the strike organiser, is the brother of the Charlie McMahon, who was arrested in 1898. So these people have quite a tradition of union militancy. Samuel Kelly, you know Kelly Cole? Catchy sort of jingle on the TV, Kelly Cole. Samuel Kelly bought the colliery and 2 spinning mills in Killeen and the Brickyard in 1921. Production begins in 1924. 43 men go out on strike because of the interests of 6 non-union who want to close shop, Irish Transport and General Workers Union. There are a meeting of 250 people in Killeen and a 300 person meeting in Dungannon in connection with the strike, and the strike is addressed by, you guessed it, Dawson Gordon. Dawson Gordon said that they had tried to make the present strike a sectarian issue. Kelly admits there's the same thing that's happened in Browns, the same thing that happened in Caledon. In order to break the strike, he employs scab labour on a sectarian basis. He gets Protestant people, he ships them in the cars from Middletown and puts them into the brickyard to run. Now, the strike fails, but this is a brilliant letter. And I found this letter in the censored material with Republican prisoners on the prison ship Argenta. So the Republican prisoners on the Argenta knew that the authorities were censoring their letters, but all their mates and all their relatives outside were writing about all this political stuff and all the illegal things that they did. And then the censor wrote it all down and blanked it out. And there's a file full of this stuff in Prony about all the cockfights and everything that were going, and the poaching distillation that was going on in Tyrone. So you see all these good, clean living, working class people in Tyrone, they like nothing more than a fight of poaching and they would have cockfight. And they also report on political strikes and stuff. So one letter from one of the strikers to an internee, who's the local national school teacher, says, "The strike at the Brickyard still continues and looks very blue. We are down and out and all through the signing of the treaty." And the censor actually blanked out the U and the C. I don't think the person who wrote it did. It has to be true, that's his own vernacular. So, Ministry of Home Affairs, the 20th of June 1924, this is the report. The management have decided to fight this strike to the finish, and already they have 24 strikebreakers, all Protestants engaged. The men are working under ample police protection, and all precautions necessary for the protection of life and property have been taken. The works have been picketed by the strikers, but up to the present no intimidation has taken place. The strikers are members of the only branch of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union in this district. Now, there are good reasons why the ITGW weren't strong in this area, that the workers who would have joined it had joined the Workers Union with people like Dawson Gordon beforehand. But there's a similar affinity in terms of outlook and position. But this isn't the end of Samuel Kelly's problems in Killeen, and anyone who's been to Killeen will know that it has many problems. On her lockout, RUC report the 28th of November 1924, on her colliery. The management should make this the so Samuel Kelly goes, you see them ones around Killeen and in dark, they're no good. Can't control them. I know what we'll do. We'll go to England and we'll get a load of workers. Good English workers who come in and do what they're told. So they advertise for jobs in Onaher in England, right? And they offer them a cottage and everything. What they don't realise is that all the unemployed miners in England are unemployed because they were kicked out because of Black Friday. So they recruit a load of communists from England and take them to Killeen. And they go on strike. And they meet the manager of them. Yeah, this really happened. They meet and they tell the management, right, this is their demand. The management should meet a committee of the men each week to discuss the running of the mill or the mine. This was regarded by the management as pure communistic. Okay? The management said that the strikers were all absolute Bolsheviks in their attitude and that their leader Shaw was an out and out communist. They then have a parade in Killeen, right? And this is at the time that the A Special Full-Time Constabulary have been demobilised, okay? And they're a bit peeved off because they've lost their full-time jobs as police constables, and that the local Republicans have come back from the Argenta, right? So the local Hibernian band leads communist English strikers on a protest march that's joined by demobilised A Specials and former Republican internees. So, there you go. So how does this express itself in the Free State? And this is how we are. This is Kevin O'Higgins, the most conservative revolutionist that ever lived. This is someone who's equally as conservative. Owen O'Duffy is the head of the Garda Síochána, but this period he was the Chief of Staff of the Free State Army. This is what O'Higgins has to say about these people. In the Dáil, he says in January 1923 that they are leavened with some small amount of idealism and fanaticism, but there is a great deal of greed and envy, and lust and drunkenness and irresponsibility in the opposition to the government. All this is fostered by the idea that there is a breakdown in law and in the sanctions of law, that the existing government is unable to function effectively, and that the sun is shining for the lawbreaker. We are dealing with anarchy under cover of a political banner. The problem is psychological, that should be the, rather than physical. We have to vindicate the idea of law and order government as against anarchy. And this is what O'Higgins does. They set up the Protective Corps and the Citizen Defence Association within the Criminal Investigation Division. They then set up the Special Infantry Corps, and they are employed as whites against the strikers, agricultural labourers in Waterford, for the most part. As O'Connor, who's from Waterford himself, said, therefore the state intervention provided the anvil against which the employer could strike with effect. So having dealt with the Republicans, the Free State then crushes trade union militancy. 20,000 workers in the strike. This is the postal workers. Military are employed as strike breakers. Okay, this is in 1922 in Dublin. Alright. A carnival of reaction. Remember that? This is William Cosgrave, the leader of the Free State, dressed in the thicky bow with the king, and the leader of the other dominions. I think that's Stanley Baldwin there. The Manchester Guardian. So what do the employers, the big farmers, the green industrialists in Dublin want from the Free State government? Well, in the Manchester Guardian reported on the 25th of February 1922 that one Cork employer says that they needed Mussolini, who crushed the Vienna Rosso, the similar activity in the 2 Red Years in northern Italy, and amongst agricultural labourers in the Mezzogiorno, the peasant south. He says, Cork employers, but unfortunately I don't think there is any chance of another Mussolini arising in this country. Well, there was. Okay? Patrick McGilligan, also a member of the Free State Cabinet, and also attended which private school with Kevin O'Higgins? Clondallows, okay, which was also where John Redmond went to school, and where John Bruton went to school, and where an awful lot of people of a similar sort of disposition, went to school. Patrick McGilligan says, "It is not the function of the Dáil to provide work, and the sooner this is realised the better. People may have to die in this country of starvation." And they did. There was a famine in Ireland, a mini famine in Ireland in 1925. Okay? We are a long way from public ownership of the means of production and the democratic programme of January 1919. Southern Labour. In the South, the Labour Party, led by Johnson, voted for the Anglo-Irish Treaty, thinking we consolidate our position. The Free State then liquidated the Republicans, the anti-treatyites. They didn't do Labour any favours. They then turned on Labour. They were then wrecked by divisions around the arrival of Larkin. Larkin is a genuine revolutionary. He has serious problems in his conduct, but he has an incredibly low opinion of Johnson and O'Brien in these ways. The Irish trade union movement, north and south, still maintained an all-Ireland structure, still was involved in negotiations with government, but at no point did they ever come close to the level of involvement that they had in this brief window of opportunity during the revolutionary period. In fact, the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, I think, reached a low ebb of under 20,000 in 1929. This is because Larkin takes all the dockers out of them, and the idea of the one big union dies in Waterford. What happens in Waterford? The agricultural labourers in Waterford seize control of large tracts of the county and try and run the county cooperatively, run agriculture in the county cooperatively. And William O'Brien withholds strike pay. He refuses to pay them. So what good is one big union if the union won't, if an injury to one is not the concern of all? And the whole idea of syndicalism unravels. Now it unravels because of the nature of the economic depression, but it unravels also because, like Connie said, partition is instigated and the interests of the powerful and the wealthy on both sides of the border, okay, are consolidated. And when the interests of the powerful and the wealthy are consolidated, it's the least fortunate and the most underprivileged in society who lose out. And this is why you have Catholics and Protestants going outside to the toilet in Belfast. This is why you have 2 million people leaving the Free State. But this is not to say that these people meekly accepted this or thought that this was the natural order of thing, that it couldn't be changed. Emmett Stagg, who himself was a member of the Labour Party, called the Irish Labour Party the political wing of St Vincent de Paul. They had come a long way from the cooperative Commonwealth. And we'll finish on this. So this is the type of society then that emerges from the Irish Revolution. Don't invest too much hope in De Valera and the Republicans. Okay? De Valera rides into power on the back of the next great economic depression in 1929, the Great Depression in the early 1930s. He uses Potter O'Donnell's idea of the land annuities to gain massive electoral support for his new party Fianna Fáil. He uses the language of, he's like Perón in Argentina, populist social reform agenda. The big farmer against the wee farmer, Fianna Fáil against Cumann and Yale. He gets into power in his 1937 constitution that's still there. He enshrines the right to private property. It's still an article in the constitution. Potter O'Donnell talks about a telephone conversation that he had with De Valera whenever De Valera was president and buying and whatnot. He says, "You've got to remember, Dave," said O'Donnell, "that damn nearly 1 million Irish people left here when you were Taoiseach. I'll be fair now," said De Valera. "If you had been in my place, there'd have been emigration too." "Yes, Dave, that's quite true," O'Donnell seems to have replied. "If I had been in your place, there would have been a great many people who would have left the country, but they would not have been the same people." So this is the type of Ireland that we have inherited from the revolution 100 years ago. It's an Ireland, and before we start congratulating ourselves about how progressive we are and how we gay marriage and, well, we do in the South anyway, gay marriage and women have access to abortion, etc., etc., it's a very limited form of liberal equality. It's the equality of the individual. It's not social equality. It's what a man who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, a French socialist at the time, Anatole Frank said, "The law in its majestic equality forbids the rich as well as the poor to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread." It's just that only one of them has to do it. And that's the picture of the family down in the Garda station in Dublin who couldn't get anywhere to live. Thank you very much.